Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our next video on environmental science and specifically going over symbiosis. Let's get started on this next video. So, do interactions in species always result in harm? Now, when we look at species interactions, and we've talked about species interactions before with our predator-prey relationships, we've been talking about organisms that are going through and consuming other organisms for energy. And in one case, one species is going to go through and benefit, and the other species is not. However, the interactions and relationships that species have amongst themselves do not limit themselves to the predator-prey relationships that we're going through and looking at. So what we're going to be delving into is the other types of relationships that might exist between organisms that allow them to live within the ecosystems they reside in. So when we talk about symbiosis, what is symbiosis? Well, it's a close relationship between two species in which at least one species benefits. However, for the other species, the relationship could be positive, negative, or neutral. And when we look at three types of symbiosis here, there's going to be mutualism, and that's where both species are going to go through and benefit. There's then going to be parasitism, and this is where one species goes through and benefits and the other is harmed. And then lastly here we're going to see commensalism, and this is where one species benefits and the other is unaffected. So all three of these relationships we're going to go through and look at and see examples and how these exist in nature. So let's go through and look at mutualism first. Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship in which both species go through and benefit. And the best example for us to go through and look at here is going to be the goby and the shrimp. Now if we zoom in here, there's these small fish called goby, and then we have shrimp that go through and burrow and create these holes here. Now there are going to be some great differences between these two individuals here. One is a crustacean and one is going to be a vertebrate and a fish here. Now the goby is going to have really good eyesight and it's going to have the ability to see predators coming. Now the shrimp has very poor eyesight, but it can burrow and create these holes much easier than the goby. So what the shrimp is going to do is it's going to dig in the sand and create these little holes along the seabed, and this allows both of these individuals to go through and hide in this home here. Now what the goby is going to do is it's going to be right next to the shrimp. The shrimp has these antennae which allows it to go through and feel where the goby is. And when the goby goes through and sees a predator, what it's going to do is it's going to go through and move into that burrow, and as a result the shrimp is going to feel the goby move very quickly into that hole, and what it's going to do is allow it to be protected. So when a predator approaches, the goby can see it coming, and as a result of this, the shrimp knows that when the goby goes into the burrow, it must do the same. This is a symbiotic relationship and a mutualistic relationship because the shrimp goes through and burrows but gets good eyesight and protection and knows when to hide from predators, whereas the goby goes through and gets a home and all it has to do is look for the predators coming. Both species are benefiting in this scenario, and that's why we call it mutualism. Now, coevolution is often going to occur in species that are involved in mutualistic relationships. An example of this might be flowering plants and species that go through and pollinate them, such as bees. Plants have evolved flowers with traits that promote pollination by particular species, and the pollinator species in turn have evolved traits that help them obtain pollen or nectar from certain species of flowers. So it's important for us to go through and make sure that we're relating this to evolution, because these organisms will go through and co-evolve with these mutualistic relationships. Alright, so the next relationship that we're going to look at is parasitism. And parasitism is a symbiotic relationship in which one species, the parasite, benefits while the other species, the host, is harmed. So here's our host, and in this example we're going to use a human. And in this case, the parasite's going to be a tapeworm inside the human gut system. So as we go through and digest our food, we're going to break it into smaller molecules, and then those molecules are going to be absorbed by our small intestine. So normally we're going to absorb the nutrients and get the energy from the food that we're going through and breaking down, and then that's going to be used in our body. Now in the case of some of the worms that might exist in our gut systems, these worms are going to go through and take some of the nutrients that would normally be absorbed by the host, in this case the humans. So what is the worm getting out of this? What are the tapeworms getting out of this particular scenario? Well, they're getting food and they're also getting a home for the host there. Now the human in this case, is not benefiting from these tapeworms, because if they're not going through and getting all the nutrients and all the energy that they need, they're going to have to consume and look for more food. The other thing is these tapeworms can cause damage to the internal systems within our bodies. Now, back in the early 20th century, they used to give people these dietary pills. These dietary pills contained about 100 tapeworms in one of these pills. And what it would do is it would promise that it would allow people to lose weight, and you could eat as much food as you wanted. So you would take this pill, and it would go through and it would put tapeworms in your intestinal system. And then as you ate, the tapeworms could consume some of that food. Now, when they were going through and giving out this weight loss medication, nobody knew that it actually had tapeworms in it. And there were some really risky side effects associated with this. The eggs and the tapeworms that were consumed as they went through and went into the intestinal system went through and caused diarrhea, abdominal pain, and it created a lot of neurological issues in some of these patients. And as a result, it caused permanent damage to their intestinal system that could not be fixed. So again, when we're looking at parasitism here, we're looking at a relationship in which one species is going to benefit and the other is going to be harmed. All right, so the last one that we have here is commensalism here, and this is a symbiotic relationship in which one species benefits while the other species is not affected. One species typically uses the other for a purpose other than for food. So let's go through and look at two scenarios here. If we look at the scenario on the left here, we have this jungle with these large leaves growing off of these trees. If we have a tree frog that's going through and hiding among these leaves, the tree frog's benefiting from this scenario, its relationship with this plant. But the plant's really not getting anything out of it. The tree frog's not disturbing the plant, but it's not getting any benefit out of it. So we can see that the tree frog has a positive benefit there, whereas the plant's really getting nothing. Now, if we look at this other scenario here, we can see egrets going through and eating insects stirred up by cattle in the savannas there. Again, the egrets are going to go through and kind of hide amongst those cattle. The cattle are going to go through as they're grazing, stir up these insects, but the cattle's really getting nothing out of this relationship. The egrets are definitely benefiting from this relationship because it's going through and allowing them to go through and consume insects that are being stirred up. So when we talk about commensalism, remember one species is benefiting and the other species is kind of getting nothing out of it. It's almost a neutral relationship to them. Alright, so to go through and review symbiosis, there's three types. Mutualism, and remember mutualism is where both species benefit from that relationship. The next one there is parasitism, and parasitism is where one species is hurt, the host, while the other benefits, the parasite. And then last, commensalism. If we look at this, one species benefits while the other is unaffected. Alright, so this is going to be the end of the video. Did you guys learn? Did you learn a couple of things here? Did you learn about what symbiosis is? Did you learn about the three types of symbiosis? And then lastly, did you learn about the details associated with each relationship? This is going to be the end of the video. I will see you all in class tomorrow.